Alexis Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to speak about Puerto Rico, a place near and dear to my heart, and thank you for being present. Puerto Rico is in a time of historical crisis, which is really the case for all of the Earth's species, and I don't mean that in any hyperbolic sense. I mean, this is the real deal, and oftentimes we look at hurricanes simply as just a natural disaster, but the social and environmental devastation that Puerto Ricans are facing is really a man-made disaster more than anything. Colonial subjugation, poverty and economic hardship, environmental injustice, and wide levels of corruption at the local level are just some examples of that man-made crisis that was the case well before Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma, and is the case now afterwards. So I may at times reference before and after. I am a believer that Hurricane Maria has changed. It is a moment in time that there is no going back to. It is a new period in time. And Hurricane Maria really exposed the extreme socioeconomic inequality that exists in Puerto Rico for those who couldn't see that already. And it exposed the differential neglect of the island's rural areas. For some context, Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. It is a territorial possession that belongs to the United States. Right? Time and time again, the Supreme Court has upheld insular cases that clearly describe this. Right? Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. It does not have the tools that a state has in the United States. It does not have the tools that an independent country has around the world. Right? Puerto Rico is a subject to colonial subjugation and has been for 500 plus years. Right? And it's important to keep that in mind when we talk about Puerto Rico. When we talk about poverty in Puerto Rico, more than half the population is below the poverty line. More than twice as much as the poorest state in the United States, which is Mississippi. Okay? More than half of the population lives under the poverty line. When we talk about income inequality, the gap between rich and poor in Puerto Rico, we are talking about a place that is more unequal than any state in the United States. Okay? More than any state in the United States, or territory for that matter. Puerto Rico is not the only place in limbo here. And when we talk, Sean Sweeney had said a lot of good points. I don't know if he's still in the room, but I appreciate a lot about what he said in regards to the privatization efforts in regards to the energy system. Mind you, my family comes from rural Puerto Rico, the inlands, and a lot of my relatives still don't have electricity. We're talking about 5 months since Hurricane Maria hit. Right? 5 months later, and still have no electricity. We often hear about rebuilding Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico doesn't need to be rebuilt. Puerto Rico needs to be transformed. What existed before Hurricane Maria, wasn't working to begin with. Puerto Rico has been in a recession for 11 years. That's not a recession. I use that term because that's what economists coined, but really, even an economist should know that 11 years in recession is a depression. Right? Puerto Rico is in an economic depression. And what we've seen, again, even before Hurricane Maria, is that the system, its political and economic system, has expired. It no longer works. This was before Hurricane Maria, and the hurricane just made that more pronounced. The energy infrastructure of Puerto Rico was archaic. and is archaic. Power plants in Puerto Rico are twice as old as the average power plant in the United States. The infrastructure has been neglected. When I mean neglected, by in regards to the maintenance of these power plants, in regards to any sort of investment to upgrade them. These are archaic energy systems, and 98% of the energy consumed in Puerto Rico is derived of fossil fuels. 98% is derived of fossil fuels. Let's also keep in mind that the cost of energy to the individual, the household, the consumer is twice as much as it is, in some cases 3 times as much as it is here in the Northeast, okay? This in a place where most people live under the poverty line. To show you how ridiculous a lot of these efforts to privatize Puerto Rico are, in a meeting with potential investors, the governor of Puerto Rico flat out said to the investors that this is a smart investment to privatize Puerto Rico because consumers pay more than the consumers in the United States. So this is a good way for you to get rich. The nerve. We have people who still have no electricity. We have people, the suicide rates in Puerto Rico are damn near doubled since the hurricane. So the nerve to say that really just explains the mindset of the profiteering of the energy system here. This all in a place that has enough sun to meet its energy demand through solar power. The capacity is already there. There has been countless energy studies done in Puerto Rico that show that Puerto Rico can be fully solar powered. And I'm using the word crisis a lot. So there's a lot of crises that we're talking about here when we talk about Puerto Rico. So that's a little bit about the energy crisis, and I don't have too much time. But I want to move on to the agricultural crisis. Puerto Rico is very food insecure, okay? Puerto Rico is very dependent on imports. Before the hurricane, 85 to 90%, depending on what you found, of the food in Puerto Rico that was consumed in Puerto Rico is imported, okay? 90% of the local agriculture was wiped out in the hurricane. So that only increased that dependency. The cost of these imported foods are 15 to 25% more to the consumer because of these archaic laws like the Merchant Marine Act, or what's often referred to as the Jones Act of 1920. Not to spend too much time on it, but these laws essentially make it so that, these imports can only come on U.S. flag ships, and the extra costs go down to the consumer. And in regards to post-Hurricane Maria, I heard various reports from friends and family that, a lot of the grocery stores not only I get worked up when I talk about that. So how much time do I have here? Okay. Food security. Okay. So not only is that issue of, we talk about issue of a lack of food sovereignty, we have a scenario where thousands of acres of agricultural land have been used for cultivation of genetically modified seeds and testing grounds for agrochemical development. Puerto Rico has essentially been used as a laboratory for a variety of experiments really throughout its history. Agent Orange was tested in the rainforest in Puerto Rico before it was used in war. And that's just one example. Water crisis. Almost all of the water systems in Puerto Rico are not up to par to clean water standards. When I talk about a water crisis, it really does relate to other issues here in the United States, like Flint, Michigan. And we're talking about the potential of Flint, Michigan happening on an island-wide scale on a place the size of Connecticut. Almost all of these water systems do not meet clean water standards. Some are not even subject to testing. According to the National Resources Defense Council, Puerto Rico has the highest rate of drinking water violations in relation